Hi, welcome back to our tutorials in Go Live. We'll be looking at lesson 4 this time in our Adobe Go Live CS2 Classroom in a Book textbook. Before we get started, I need to tell you that I copied files from the Adobe CIB folder on the U drive into my H drive so I can access them. And if you need to do that copying, you can do that now. And while you are copying, then I will give you a little bit more information as to what we're going to do as we start this. In this chapter, we're going to be working or focusing on building navigational links. One of the key things we need to understand before we can build a link is that we need to have a few criteria satisfied. We need to know what we are going to link, whether it's going to be a picture or a text. So we need something that needs to have a link applied to it, and we also need a destination for the link. So in order to actually build a link, you need to have a source area and a destination. Lesson 4 begins on page 166. The work we're going to do begins on page 169, opening the site. Step 1 instructs us to open the Lesson 04 site file. That file is found in the Lesson 04 folder, then in the Lesson 04 Start subfolder, then choose Lesson 04 site and open it. And open. Quick comment. These bugs indicate that one or more links that are supposed to be working are not working. The link is there, but is failing to do what it's supposed to do. The file that we're supposed to work with, step 2 on page 170, is called Lesson 04 Start.html. We are asked to open this file and to rename it or to save it as events.html. So I'm going to go to File, Save as events.html, and I want to double check that my page is at or in the root folder, and I am going to save it. So there's my events page. And this button up on the top here allows you to flip between a page view and a site view. Step number 4 on page 171 wants us to arrange our windows so that they're aligned vertically. So that makes it more convenient to use the select or the fetch URL function for building the hyperlinks. Step number 5 asks us to click on the events page to bring that to the foreground, and to click once anywhere within the text of the first link about us. And notice in the inspector there is a link for about us, and there's a create link and there's a break link button here. Because there's no text selected, they're both inactive. If we select the text, we'll triple click to select the text, and now you'll notice that it shows as an active remove link. So this about us is linked to a about us page. And if we click the remove link, that link is broken, and we can rebuild the link by using the fetch URL and dragging it down onto our sitemap and pushing it onto the about us, and we can recreate it. We can also use the browse function to browse to the about us page and rebuild that link. And that was steps number 5 and 6 on page 172 through 173. We're going to select the text for alumni now. We'll use the fetch link and we'll drag it to the alumni page. We'll use select the text for the sitemap area, and we'll use the fetch link and we'll connect that one. And over the page on 174, the next step is to go File Save. So we'll do that. Then we can preview this using the preview button. And notice that those are all now set up as links. So basically, to recap what we just did From page 171 to page 174, we learned how to make links using text or hypertext links. In the next section on page 175, adding links to a graphic, we're going to learn how to use an image as a link source. I'm still in preview mode from the previous section. I'm going to switch back to layout mode so I can edit. I'm going to find the Vertex EU picture up in the top left corner and click it. In my inspector, you'll notice it shows a basic, so it's a source link where that GIF came from. We are going to click on the link tab for step 2 and on the fetch URL, and we're going to be going to index.html and build the link that way. It's pretty conventional that the logo for a particular company, if clicked, would bring someone to the home page. If we wish, we can preview that. It won't show any different. It's an image with a link now, but it does show that there is a link as I mouse over it, and we're going to save. This next section that we look at from page 176 to 179 is going to be very important when it comes to building our own web pages for our projects. It has to do with using components. A component is an element in your website which is shared between two or more pages. So once you construct the component, then you can reuse it on various pages, and a typical good use of a component would be main and sub navigation bars. For an example of that, we're going to look at the About Us page, and the About Us page has a component sitting on it. There's a couple ways of identifying that this is a component, and you can see that from step 2 on page 176, where you try to pick something and it won't allow you to pick it. And you'll also notice that there's a green thing up on the top here, and that also indicates that it is a component. If we double click this navigation bar as in step 3, we can see that that navigation bar actually opens up in a separate web page. If we were to highlight the alumni text, we could build the link as we've seen before, drag and drop, and we'll do the same thing for sitemap. And then when we're done, we are going to save it. And something different is going to happen when we click save. You'll notice that there is an updating component here. So you can see that the file sitemap shares this navbar. And when we click OK, not only does this get updated on our particular events page, but also on the sitemap page. So now we're going to click OK, and then we are going to close this navbar. And if I look at the top of the About Us, you'll notice that those two alumni and sitemap now are hyperlinked. Turn the page to page 178, adding components to a page. I'm going to close our About Us page and save it, and then I'm going to go back to our events page. In order to use this nav bar, I am going to simply drag and drop it from the components area in our extras tab, and I'm going to drag it up and place it in a cell up here in this table that's been prepared for that nav bar. And what that does is it adds the component to the web page. If I double click this, you can see it opens up in the HTML page just like before. And step number 5 says that we should do some modification to this, add news and in front of events, and make the save. And it updates the nav bar. Click OK, close the nav bar. It updates our events page, and according to the dialog box, it updates our other two pages. You can see that really quickly that you can build a main navigation bar while your website is still a work in progress, and that it can be quite easily and quickly updated as needed throughout the website building phase. We're going to save our events page. The premise for page 180, creating a component, is that in regular site maintenance, there may be information that you want to change consistently and continually on the bottom of each page. So something like copyright information, which needs to get updated frequently. And one of the best ways to do that would be to use a component so that you only need to update the information in one location and then have it automatically be put through the rest of the site. Our instructions then are going to be to build a new page. So we'll go File, New, Web Pages. OK. In the Table Inspector palette, we're going to change rows and columns to 1 after we drag in a table. We are going to set the width of our table to 450 pixels, and we're going to set the border to 0. Inside that table, I'm going to type in step 3, copyright 2005, Vertex U, all rights reserved. When we have that done, we're going to go File, Save, and this time, instead of placing this into the root folder, we want to place this into the Components area. We are going to call this copyright 2005 and save it. We'll set the title to the document name, and we'll be done step number 5 when we close this window. The next step is to go to our alumni page and double click it to open it. We'll need to resize this a little bit, and then we're going to drag our copyright information to the bottom of the page, and in theory we could do that to the bottom of each and every single page throughout our whole website. For our next step, creating anchors on page 182, we want to have the events page open. And I'm going to resize it a little bit so that I can see some more of the information in here. You can see that we have a page that is fairly long, and the objective here is going to be to connect these upcoming events to the descriptions in underneath, so that when the event is clicked, then it would take you automatically to the description here. So our first event here is on June the 11th, and we're going to scroll down to that event. On the Basic Objects palette, there should be an anchor, and we're going to take the anchor and we're going to drop it in front of June 11. In the Anchor Inspection palette, we're going to change the name of the anchor to June 11. Now we're going to scroll back up to the top of the page here. We're going to pick the text Science and Arts Camp for grades 3 through 12. And we're going to use the Fetch URL button to pick the anchor we just installed in front of June 11. And you can see that there's a pound June 11 sitting there. We can save this document. The last thing we should do then is at the bottom of this text, we're going to put something in here that's called back to top, so that users can return to the top menu when they're done. We're going to pick this text. So that's step 6, typed in back to top, selected the text. Step 7 says hold down Alt, drag from the text to the top of the screen. And then lastly we can save. If you want to see if it works, click Preview, click the link, click back to top, and there you go. The next section, using anchors within a site, on page 185, involves us looking at the index.html file. So I'm going to close my events page, look at my site area here, and double click index. Highlight the text, click for more. In the URL field of the inspector, we're going to click the black arrow on the end of it, and we're going to look for anchors that we have set up, and we have an events.html. We'll pick that one, and then we'll save it. So if a user was going to look for more information on the Science and Arts Camp, they would click for more, and it would bring us to the write-up on the events page. And that's the end of that section. Creating external links on page 186. As we move on to creating external links on page 186, we need to go back to our events page. So I'm going to close our index page. We'll open our events page, and we'll get back out of preview mode and go back into layout mode. At the bottom of the page, there's some text there that says Adobe Go Live CS2. We're going to select that text. In the inspector area here, we are going to type www.adobe.com, and that basically creates an external link from our website to another website on the internet. And we can save that up. The last thing I want to take a quick look at in this chapter is an email link. To prep for creating email links on page 189, we need to close our events page. We need to go to the external tab of the site window, and it's buried underneath files. In step 2, we need to change from basic mode to site mode. We'll drag this address box into our external tab. We'll type events email and hit enter. Over in the inspector box, we can see we have something called events email, and then we need a URL here. We need to keep the mail to function, but we can change the information sitting here to an actual email address, such as info@vertecu.com. Our next step is to go to our Files tab in our site map. I'm not seeing it, so I'm going to stretch this window over a little bit, and there's our Files tab. We are asked to go to the events page and to open it up. We are asked to make sure that our external tab is back and available again. In our left column on our events page, there should be some text that reads mailing list. We'll select that. In the text inspector, we're going to pick the fetch URL button, and we'll drag it and we'll drop it onto the events email. And then we will save. In the future, for users that would click mailing list, that would bring up the events email, and they could send an email to VerteCU for further information. The last thing I want to take a look at with you is something that relates to flowcharting. It's a good idea to make sure that your web pages are making sense in terms of flow of information. So I'm going to go to the Files tab, and we're looking at using the In and Out Links palette on page 194. We are going to go to Window and Site and In and Out Links. And I'm going to make this box a little bit bigger, so we can see all the pages that lead into the events page, and we can see all the links that run out of the page. And notice that there are a couple of links in here that are questionable or broken. Those would be something that you should double check before you actually were to save and upload your page on the internet and make it available for other people to see. And that brings us to the end of lesson 4.